Here we need to debunk the idea that owning a home is the only way to prosperity for people. You can also rent a social home if you have access to it and be completely fine. This is, let's say, an ideological shift. Degrowth essentially is a political project of ecological justice and social justice. Degrowth is trying to achieve a society that thrives within planetary boundaries. That means that it wants to assure basic universal services and the satisfaction of essential needs for everybody, especially for those that today are the poorest and the most marginalized groups in our society, while at the same time reducing and downscaling the impact of our economy on nature and the environment. Housing is a crucial sector for degrowth. Housing is obviously an essential need. Everybody needs a roof on the head, so to speak. Homelessness is a social urgency that should be addressed and solved for everybody, everywhere in the world. Also, decent housing is a universal need for everybody. But we know that billions of people cannot live in decent housing today. At the same time, the production of housing, real estate, is a very impactful sector. Ecologically, is a very impactful sector. We know that almost 40% of all the emissions of our economy are somehow related to the production of real estate and the dismission of real estate, obviously, as waste of construction and demolition. What are the features that the degrowth housing system should have? The first feature that should have is that we should definitely reduce excess, decommodify housing, and make housing for use, not for market exchange. So a key degrowth policy is to avoid that housing becomes a commodity that is owned in large amounts by few very wealthy social groups. In this way, basically, we are, to a certain degree, redistributing or distributing housing that is available to those that do not have it. And this is a very radical project because obviously it tackles the essential institution of our housing systems today, which is home ownership. Not by people who own one house, obviously, that would be not a problem, but by those that own many multiples, I mean thousands of units. We know in cities there are investment trusts that own thousands and thousands of houses. And these houses are often low quality and they are placed on the market for very high rents. The second is that we should devise housing that maximizes the use of square meters. That means we need to build compact, in fact, not suburban sprawls, but compact housing that is also surrounded by high quality nature and infrastructures and services. And we need to build possibly dense, allowing people to share spaces and also to define their own way of living together. However, also, social housing systems that we built throughout the years after the World War have given us very good examples of the possible profile of a degrowth housing system. One that is obviously decommodified and guarantees access to housing, particularly to those social groups that are not able to afford it today. Other degrowth housing policies obviously should tackle debt. The production of debt, household debt, is perhaps one of the most significant features of a growth-based housing system. Essentially, people need to borrow money, a lot of money, to buy a very expensive house. And by doing that, they become dependent on the increased value of the house and also dependent on working more in order to pay their mortgage. These people are not free in the sense of the word. They are constrained by this mortgage that hangs on their head. This is a condition that should definitely be counteracted and rethought. So we need to also think in terms of the banking and in debt system that produces housing in the cities today. What I just said is often understood as a completely total renewal of the model we have now. I must say this is not completely correct because in fact we do have degrowth compatible forms of housing already in place in many cities of the world. In fact, housing cooperatives, social housing was there already, and it is still there. What, however, these models show is that they are put under constant pressure by housing markets, global housing markets. And this pressure needs to be released. We do need to cherish and recognize the value of these existing alternative housing models that are already there and build on them, also to mainstream degrowth housing. In fact, eventually the fundamental shift is not only economic, property related or design related, but it's also ideological. The home ownership is fully deepened, embodied in our minds, in the way we see our life when we grow up and things like this. Home ownership is seen as ideal. The problem is to, in fact, diversify the housing imaginary visions that we have in our head, to make more possibilities available to people. And if you are a student or early professional, early career professional in a city like Amsterdam, where I am right now, often you don't have such a choice. You just have to rent a small room or a small place, and then hopefully you have to access that to buy a house, otherwise you're out. And this is extremely frustrated and unjust. And that's why degrowth for housing essentially means also a liberation from this pressure, I would say.